Sofia Black-D'Elia stars in Single Drunk Female on Freeform. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Sofia, so nice to be with you today.
So nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I wanted to start kind of way back at the origins of the project. When you saw that first script or that first batch of scripts, what was it about the way that this show handles recovery that really drew you to the project? Because it's a very kind of special mix of comedy and drama, and does it so delicately.
Yeah. So when I first read the pilot, I knew Leslie Headland was attached to direct. I knew Jenny Connor was attached to showrun. I knew this was based on Simone Finch's real life experience. And so it was going to be a really truthful, honest telling of a gal getting sober. And all of those things were appealing enough, but the script itself was sort of the icing on the cake, because I felt like the dialogue was very grounded, considering it was a half-hour comedy, and specifically the relationship with Sam and Carol, her mother, really spoke to me. And it's my favorite dynamic on the show. I think it's the most original relationship in the show. I think it's very hard to get mother-daughter relationships right. And I thought Simone really, really was just right in the zone there. So I was really excited about it. And that fine line that you're talking about, I saw as a very big uphill battle. I knew it wouldn't be easy to accomplish, and that excited me as well. I had an instinct for how to play this character, but I also knew that it would be really challenging, and finding that balance between honesty and the sort of somberness of sobriety, but also the humor and the comedy and making it relatable and palatable, all of those things I knew would be really challenging. And I was very excited by that.
Yeah, there are so many things in your answer that I want to touch on, but I want to pick up kind of where the series picks up, because we meet Sam at one of her lowest moments. I mean, it's debatable as to what is kind of her lowest point, but we see her at a really challenging moment. So I wanted to ask you about starting the series there. I don't know, at what point you shot that scene, but what is it like for you to prepare to step into a character, at a really challenging time, and how much of her history did you know so that you could kind of bring the character there right from the jump?
Yeah, it's interesting, that scene, sort of the opening sequence of the show with the wonderful John Glazer and the office mayhem. Was one of the last scenes we shot of the entire season, because the original pilot version of that scene didn't quite work. We kind of knew on the day it didn't quite work, and we hoped we'd get the chance to get another crack at it, and we did. And so it was really wild to step on set that day after coming so far in Sam's shoes to go back to the start. And it was also sort of freeing, because I knew that I could kind of take it to a pretty intense place, knowing the rest of the series and how she really does get better. And so I was able to really play in the sandbox with that one. I knew a lot about Simone's personal journey, and we talked about how Sam's was alike and different and all of that. And but I really tried, and this is just sort of my own personal approach. I know that every actor is very different, but I really try to just kind of be in the moment. And I as a person in my own life, don't go along thinking about like all of the things that led me to a day. So I try to not think about that too much, and actually not focus so much on all of the different low moments in her life and how she got there, especially considering I think this is a person who is not conscious of her actions, and is often very surprised when they have dire consequences, as if she's acting completely normal like everybody else around her. So yeah, with that scene with Glazer, I think it was really important to me that her point of view was like, this is just another day at work. I worked with an amazing director on a play named Tyne Raffaelli, and she used to say, "Why is this night different from all other nights?" And as a Jew myself, I really appreciated that as an opening question to scene work. And I think for Sam, she really doesn't know the answer to that question until someone forces her to see it. So, you know, that night isn't different from all other nights for her. She's just going to work. She happens to be drinking. That's something she does often. And, you know, her boss is the one that pushes her to the point of, you know, throwing a telephone into his eyeball. And that answers that question for her. But yeah, I tried to be in the moment very much so in those early scenes.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you went back to shoot that last, because the season really is such a journey. And what's so great about the series, and in particular your performance, is we see Sam at various moments across a year, her first year of sobriety. And I have to imagine, you know, when you get each script and you see how much time is passing, you know, you have to recalibrate your performance every week to say, okay, you know, at what point in the journey is it? So just wanted to ask you about that process, because it's so kind of beautifully realized, you know, the change, the kind of gradual, but also big changes over time when you look over the course of the season.
Thank you so much for saying that. It was, again, one of the challenges I was excited by, at times daunted, but tried to just see it as an exciting challenge. But I'd never done something like that before, where week to week there was so much time passing, and especially in your first year of sobriety, there are huge changes happening every day, and physically, mentally, emotionally, obviously in her relationships. So I tried to really map out for myself what might be really obvious to her and to those around her, and then other things that might be more subtle. I think, you know, there's the obvious stuff of physically in the first few months of sobriety, she's in withdrawal, she's exhausted, she's having a hard time sleeping. So that's going to affect her very much. And then as the season went on, I think the more subtle things, like, is she able to communicate with her mother in a more honest, empathetic way? How is it 1 step forward, 3 steps back, that kind of thing? Because especially with this sort of elephant in the room of the loss of her father and her mother's husband, I don't think that would come very easily. And I think it might take a lot more than a year to get there. But Ali and I tried to have little moments here and there that felt slightly different. And Jenny had one really wonderful idea, I thought, which was, and I fought it initially, but I think she was totally right, as Jenny normally is. But Ali does my makeup, or helps me do my makeup, in the finale for the wedding. And in the pilot, she's sort of commenting on my makeup, and I literally slammed the door in her face. And I felt like that was a huge leap, and that they wouldn't be there by the end of the season. And Jenny said, no, I really think that they are. And as somebody who's in the edit and watching it, I can tell you that you're there. And I think she was right, you know, and that is a small little thing, because I obviously, you know, it's not that Carol's so amazing at doing makeup. I think Sam probably still went later and fixed it herself, but to let her do that and to let her in that way, I think shows great growth for both of them. So that those little moments, I think, helped tell that story.
Right. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you next, because the series really does chronicle, as much as it's about Sam's recovery, it's about, you know, mending these various relationships in her life, primarily, you know, with Carol, her mother. So just wanted to ask you about working with Ali Sheedy, because as you said earlier, the relationship is so unique, I think, and very, you know, when I was preparing for this, thinking, you know, very hard to pin down, like what words could I use to describe, you know, the dynamic. It's fairly challenging. So I just wanted to ask you, you know, how do you kind of describe their relationship as it goes on, and just talk about working with Ali?
Yeah, I mean, I was so incredibly nervous to meet Ali Sheedy. And I tell her this all the time. She made being a weird, kooky brunette very cool for me as a child. And so I'm forever indebted to her. And she was just so warm and so collaborative from the second we met. And we both sort of instinctively knew who these women were, and specifically who they were to each other. Both of us have very deep, strong connections with our moms. We have complicated, messy, lovely relationships with our moms. we are both Jewish women with Jewish moms. These are two Jewish women. We just felt we knew a lot. We felt we were coming to the table with a lot of information and the writing was there. This is again, based on Simone's relationship with her mother. And so the thing that you're sort of touching on, I think, is exactly what I love so much about it. You really can't put this relationship in a box. It's not like a mother-daughter relationship you've seen before on TV. It's not easy to explain. They clearly love each other very much. They clearly have a lot of compassion for one another, but they are at odds almost every second of every day. And there's so much passive aggression. There's so much unsaid history between the two of them. I think they are far more alike than either of them would care to admit. And that's so much to play with. And to do that with a scene partner like Ali, who comes to the table with a million ideas every day, is so excited to work, is so excited to collaborate. She loves pushing my buttons. You know, on my coverage, she's 10 times meaner than whatever you've seen in the cut. And she drives me absolutely crazy and we both love it. It's truly my favorite part of this gig by a lot. And the thing I'm most excited about doing in season 2. I really want to get into that more. And my pitch was that I think we should do a bottle episode where it's just Ali and I in family therapy, and we leave and we've learned absolutely nothing, because that's how I see them, you know, is like, you can tell them a million things that would make this relationship easier. And I don't know that they're really capable of hearing it, which I love. I love playing.
I hope they take you up on that, because it
I
really sounds so fitting.
Thank you.
And you know what, too, it kind of builds on one of my favorite moments for the two of you in the season, which is spreading your father's ashes, which, you know, Carol kind of sneaks up on Sam. Sam isn't expecting it. She says it's not even legal. We haven't gotten the permit to do this, but it's a really nice moment. It kind of compounds on Sam wanting to make an amends to Carol and to have this really emotional moment, which is also, you know, it's emotional, but it's also very funny, the scene. I just wanted to ask you about doing that scene, which really feels like a turning point for the two of them in their relationship. You know, what does that kind of unlock for you as an actor moving forward, especially since, as you said, you know, the show's coming back for a second season?
Yeah, that was my favorite day of the show. It was just me, Ali, Trayvon Free, and Simone in the woods. And we had an unbelievable day. The writing in that scene in particular, I thought was so special, because it really encapsulates that line I was talking about. It is, they're literally spreading the ashes of her dad, and it is still somehow funny. And a lot of that is the writing and Ali and Simone's understanding of, you know, grief and how it's often funny, and the instinct is to laugh. And yeah, and then the conversation that follows includes one of my favorite lines of the show, which is "Don't be a blame hog." Like, they can't even apologize to each other well, you know, and they're ultimately, I think, both very self-centered women. And so I don't know how much that amends was for Carol. I think maybe it was for Sam to feel like she made the amends to Carol. And I don't know how much Carol apologizing was for Sam. You know, I think now she feels like she's been a better mother. But in their weird way, that was a huge step forward. And I'd be curious to see, you know, what other conversations they attempt to have now, because I think they would both consider that going fairly well. So what else are we capable of? And then, of course, I think that probably it wouldn't go as well as they would hope. But it was a really, really fun day of shooting. And actually, Ali fell into the river that day accidentally, and I thought we were going to lose the legend Ali Sheedy because of the show. And one of our amazing camera operators saved her from the river, but she came out of it hysterically laughing, like drenched, covered in fake ashes. And I was just like, God, I love this woman. This is the image that I want to take with me for the rest of my life.
That's really funny. And also makes me think too, you know, the series is really good at these two-hander scenes or episodes. So talk about working with the character James, played by Garrick Bernard. The relationship over the season is really great, and evolves so much. And obviously in the finale, you know, is going in a very different direction. But there's that really terrific 2-person episode, the flashback to the Thanksgiving, which is so fun and really, as I said, delicate and emotional. Just talk about shooting that, because I imagine, the two of you kind of exploring that dynamic over the course of a whole episode was really challenging but exciting.
It was. That was Jenny's episode, and she'd been talking about it for a while. I knew she was going to write a flashback episode, and I was really eager to read it. And I thought she just did such a beautiful job. It's a difficult thing to do, because at that point in the story, I think we know as an audience almost too much. It's not really fun to see these two people drunk at this point. It's sad. And to tell that story in a half-hour comedy, I think, is really difficult. And I think she did such a beautiful job. And we knew Leslie Headland was going to come back to direct it again, which was great. And it was a challenge. I mean, it was, stepping back into this past version of themselves, and again, finding the humor in it, I think was probably easier for me, because Sam is not really quite at the point of destruction that James is at in that episode. That is sort of his breaking point, I think. Whereas for her, she's still on the high of the drunk. And Garrick, bless his heart, this is his first acting gig in front of the camera. And I think that's a really daunting episode. And he came ready to play and sort of, I think, was humbled by it and eager to learn. And I think he did a great job with it. It's a tough one. But I found it really emotional, and it is fun to see these people. I think at that point in their lives, you do really appreciate how far they've come because of it. So again, kudos to Jenny for that. It's a tough one, I think.
Yeah, it is, and it's a hard watch, as you're saying, but also so revealing of the character. I think we were, hoping to see the origins of that relationship. I want to ask you more about James in a minute, but I also have to ask you, in the finale, we open with this scene of Sam talking with her father in a dream. I just want to ask you about, number one, again, another emotional scene, but also working with Mitch Hurwitz. When I saw him, I was so surprised and was so delighted by it. Can you just talk about working with him for that scene?
Yeah, it was such a joy. It was so fun. What a weird day for him to come in and play. You're my dead father, and then I'm going to see you as a violin eventually. And he's just so smart, obviously, and so lovely, and helped lighten it. Because like you said, that's a sad, you read that on the page, it's pretty heartbreaking. And his presence itself is so bubbly and bright and off kilter in the way that I think our show is. I think he was sort of the perfect fit. That was such a great idea. And he was a good sport, because that scene actually took a really long time to shoot. Our show moves really quickly, but that one, because it was a little bit more stylized and we wanted it to feel like a dream, I think it took longer maybe than he thought that it would for just coming in for a day. And he was amazing and really held my hand through it, because it's tricky, when you're dreaming, you don't know you're dreaming. So what does she think is happening? Was a wild thing to try to figure out. But he's just so funny, and I hope that we can find a way, whether it's in a flashback or another dream sequence or something, to bring him back, because I really loved working with him.
Yeah, me too. Fingers crossed. And speaking of season 2, the finale puts James in a tough place, puts Sam in a weird place, because she's really holding on to her sobriety and trying to kind of keep, people who are jeopardizing that, away.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to ask you, the show's been renewed, as we said. So do you know anything about season 2? Is there anything you can tease? And if not, where do you hope to see Sam and James and these other characters, go in season 2?
Yeah, I don't know that much, honestly. I think we're having kind of casual conversations right now, so nothing is like super solidified. I'd love to see, like I said, the deepening of Sam and Carol's relationship. And I want to know more about them. And I really want to know more about Dad and how that affected them. I loved working with Lily Harrington almost more than I've ever loved working with another actor in my entire life. I think she's just like fun incarnate. And I love Sam and Felicia's relationship, so I really want to explore more of that. And yeah, it's a really sad, I think sort of surprising place that we leave the Sam and James story. I think from what I understand from Simone and a lot of my other friends that are in the program, often early on, you sort of see yourself as the only person at risk. You know, you're new, you're figuring all of this out for the first time. You have, you know, less time than everyone else in the room. You're still probably in a bit of the self-centered, I'm the center of the universe vibe that a lot of people just starting out in recovery feel. And so it can be surprising when the person you think is strongest and has so much time and is guiding you through that process relapses themselves. But it's really truthful to the experience of recovery. And so I'm glad that that's how they decided to tell that story. But it is sad to see James, you know, kind of trying to pull her with him. So I'm very curious to see how that gets played out in season 2. I hope for both of them that they realize that maybe this isn't quite the fit that they thought that it was. And they put their recovery first, but you never know because it's a love story and it's TV. But I'm really excited to see what happens with that. I love Charlie Hall so much, and I really hope that we get to see Joel find love somewhere. And that character is a kind of a really, him and Bob are kind of like my two favorite sort of like lovely men on this show that like really don't know how to deal with the strong-willed women in their lives. So I'm excited for all of those things, really.
We certainly are too. Sofia Black-D'Elia, congratulations on the first season, and thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. That was really fun.